It's October, so that means it's spooky month. So, I wanted to have a quick chat and suggest to you 3 scary, spooky, creepy horror books that I think would be really good reads in October, that would be great Halloween reads that you would enjoy. And I wanted to talk about a few books that I haven't spoken about before on the channel, as far as I can remember. So I'm not going to cover again any of the books I've already reviewed, or cover again any of the books in my top 10 horror books list. You can check out my top 10 horror list or the reviews for the horror books that I've read via the playlist on my channel. And if any of the books today sound interesting, you can pick up copies for yourself through my affiliate link in the description below. It costs you the same thing, but just helps support the channel. But the first book. The first book, like one of my other favourite books, Pen Pal, started life as a story on Reddit's r/nosleep page, which is a great horror short fiction community. And this one is Stolen Tongues by Felix Blackwell. This has one of the best opening prologues of any horror book I've ever read, and is one of those rare horror books where it was actually frightening, and I was actually kind of scared of it. Most horror books are, you know, you think about the concept of, oh, that's kind of scary, or that's a bit exciting. But this was like the true sweaty palms, looking out the window in the middle of the night, wanting to leave the light on sort of fear for just a little bit there. And for that reason, it's always going to be a favourite of mine. We follow a young couple who are house sitting in a cabin in the snowy wilderness with the forest all around them, and it appears through certain events that they're not alone here. Someone or something is here with them, and it's just full of some really great imagery and some creepy, scary moments out in the snow in the wilderness. It draws on folk tales and old legends, on the fear of being alone in the wilderness and of otherness. The first half of this book is undoubtedly stronger than the back half. Nothing in the back half is so bad that it taints my perception of the book, but it doesn't reach the heights of the first half again. The first half of the book is genuinely one of the scariest things I've read, and one of the most enjoyable things I've read. And I think those chills and that fear that it gave me would be a great pick for a Halloween read. Up next is something with a bit more of a modern setting and a modern message. This is from the writer and voice behind the amazing Magnus Archives podcast, which, side note, if you haven't listened to, October's a perfect time to start. There's, I think, 5 seasons of it, and then there's a second series as well now. The Magnus Archives is a set of short stories, horror short stories, told with a meta-narrative over the top, and it is performed amazingly by the author of this book, Jonathan Sims, written by him as well. And it is just probably my favourite podcast of all time, with some of the scariest stories I've ever read. It's rare that I'll be driving around listening to a horror podcast and I'll get that sweaty palm feeling, but there are some episodes of Magnus Archives that really get it going. So yeah, so the Magnus Archives is a set of horror short stories with set in the same universe with a meta-narrative running over the top. But back to the book, 13 stories. This is a set of horror short stories set in the same universe with a meta-narrative on top. Right, what you know. And it takes heavily from traditional haunted house stories, but really changes it up, places it in a more modern setting, and gives us some more modern concepts and ideas to deal with. It's all based around this one complex, Banyan Court, where there are really 2 different buildings going on. There is the poor, affordable housing accommodation where the poorer residents and the workers live, and then there is luxury apartments all the way up to a luxury penthouse apartment with a reclusive millionaire. And the 13 stories in 13 stories revolve around the residents and guests of Banyan Court, as they each deal with different, often supernatural things or supernatural thoughts that are going on. And as with any short story collection, there are hits and misses. The hits far outnumber the misses in this one, and where it does miss, they're just not quite as good. There's no story in here that I thought was bad. And I think the main themes of the book being inequality and corporate greed, that sort of thing, has a really important message for the day and age we live in, and is, if anything, more true now than when it was written, and is kind of an important topic that we should be talking about more. And couching it in this horror setting lets Jonathan Sims explore it in a way that kind of brings the inherent horror of that topic to light with more traditional horror elements. And there's some stories in here that are genuinely scary. There's some stories in here that are really thought-provoking. And I think it all comes together pretty satisfactory at the end. And finally, I've read a few books now by Darcy Coates, probably most well known for their haunted house books. I'm actually going to suggest a book that isn't one of the haunted house books, and that is Hunted by Darcy Coates. This is a story about a hiker that goes missing in the wilderness, another wilderness story. I find the wilderness very scary. I find isolation really important in horror books. I find the survival against the elements to be really interesting as well. And this is no different. This is full of all of that. A young woman hiker goes missing, and it seems like the cops aren't doing enough to try and find them. So her brother and his friends get together to mount their own expedition out into the wilderness to find her. And while out there, they begin to find clues that they might not be alone in the wilderness here, and that her disappearance may not be a simple case of a hiker straying from the path. With the sense of strangeness and danger kind of culminating when they discover the lost hiker's camera with mysterious photos on it that are dated after she went missing. This isn't a traditional boo ghost Halloween read, but it is a book that I thought was tense and suspenseful and thrilling, and the mystery at the core of it fits perfectly into a horror month. I thought this book had some really scary moments. I thought this book had some really chilling imagery, and I think it all really comes together in a really satisfying mystery, and it's written fantastically with some characters that I really liked, some characters that I really didn't like, but I was meant to not like them, so they're still really good characters. And I think it would be a really good read for October if you're looking for something a little less traditional horror. So there you have it, 3 horror books that I haven't really talked about before that I think you guys would all enjoy. Thank you so much for watching, everyone. Please do all the YouTube things. It helps out immensely. Thank you, everyone, so much for the support you've given me so far. And the question of the day is, what are you reading in October? Personally, I think I'm going to read Something Wicked This Way Comes, thanks to the poll we ran on the channel. Make sure to check out the community tab if you want to vote on that. And I might read The Shining as well, and maybe also Dracula. We'll see how I go. But most of all, just remember to keep reading.